General Robert E. Lee once said, "A land without memories is a people without freedom." We would go a step further and say that a people without memories is a people who doesn't know who they are today. Since the cannons cooled at Appomattox, we of the South have been taught to despise our past. The Yankee set out on a mission of peace with the goal of conquest to reshape the Southerner in his image, to change our vocabulary, enlighten us with their morality, and force our children to remember a history that is not their own.
Welcome to Charlie Horse Radio, a conversational podcast on Southern history and culture, which has for its goal restoring the memory and freedom of this land. We are Jason and John, two Orthodox Christians with a love for the South. If you enjoy this show and would like to support, please consider subscribing on Substack for free or for $5 a month or $50 a year.
Well, you gonna pull those pistols or whistle Dixie? If I get to liking someone, they ain't around long.
I notice when you get to disliking someone, they ain't around for long either.
Pretty sure we have time to bury them, fellas.
Hell with them fellas. Buzzards gotta eat, same as worms.
Progress is both a slogan and a philosophy, a device for social control and a belief in the reality of a process of cosmic development toward some far-off divine event. The idea has been vigorously assailed as a superstition or a myth and has been defended with equal energy as an aspect of the natural necessity of the world. Materialists and idealists alike have adopted it as a Weltanschauung. Both skeptics and theologians have denounced it as an aberrant delusion. John Dewey believes that modern industrial technology provides us with a method for securing progress and for preserving our culture against decline. Oswald Spengler looks on industrialism and its concomitant manifestations as evidence of decay in the spirit of Western life. Sociologists have struggled with the notion of progress for a long time, and for the most part have adopted an agnostic attitude. They have failed to find either a satisfactory definition of progress or any criterion to determine whether or not a specific social change is really progressive in any final sense. End quote. That is the first paragraph of essay number 5 in the book, I'll Take My Stand, A Critique of the Philosophy of Progress by Lyle H. Lanier. And welcome to Charlie Horse Radio. I'm Jason, and I'm here with John. What's up, John?
Howdy, y'all.
And our guest today to talk about this essay with us is Frank Kidd. He is a fiction writer, writes pulp fiction stories that don't suck. He's got 2 novels out right now, Medicine Woman and Once Upon a Time in Argentina. You can go find those. We'll link both in the show notes. You can read them in paperback form, or you can listen to my dulcet tones read them to you in audiobook form if you want to. So welcome, Frank.
Hey, what's going on? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say to introduce yourself before we get going?
No, I think you covered it. I'm sure you're on Substack. You know who I am.
Yeah, you've probably seen Frank posting, pulp art.
Yeah,
of like dudes killing mammoths and like hot women.
Yes,
like spread out on plane wings and stuff like that.
Yes, I run an anti-progress page on Substack.
Nice. So speaking of anti-progress, I think John was said one. I'm kind of stealing John's thunder, but like one of the questions he wanted to ask you was, what made you want? Because you wanted to do this particular essay when we asked you to be a guest on the show. So like, what made you want to do this one in particular?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's because I hadn't actually read the essay yet. I was like flipping through the book, but then I started reading it. And I picked it out because it's already kind of a orientation / topic that I think about a lot. So that's why I was so gung-ho to do this one specifically. And then I got like 3 or 4 pages into it, and I was like, yep, this is the one I want to do.
Nice. Why are you so interested in progress? Like, what's the interest in that?
Yeah, I mean, Lanier gets into it, but there's so I forget where he says it, but he basically talks about progress, and then he asks the question if like all these trinkets, right? Cheap electronic consumer goods make the actual human any happier. Which is something I'm always like thinking about and going back and forth on, which is like what actually makes me happy. And it's not material wealth. It's like it's family. It's it's counterintuitively when you get done working, like doing manual labor at the end of the day. You kick off your sweaty ass shoes and have a nice cold glass of water. That, and you're like fully physically spent.
Yeah.
That's when you feel the most happy and fulfilled. So we've gotten ourselves into this like conundrum as a society where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna fucking grind on the corporate hamster wheel under fluorescent lights and slowly die, and it's not making anybody happier. It's like family, hard day's labor, that kind of shit is what is actual human flourishing.
Or maybe murking Chinese illegal fishermen with your bros.
Yes.
Like you could do that, right?
Yeah, that would be the high point of like Faustian Spengler's Faustian civilization, right?
Yeah.
Pre-decline.
Well, yeah, you said that. You said like the dying under fluorescent lights thing, and that's like, I mean, that's the theme of Once Upon a Time in Argentina, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So that makes sense. I don't know, John, is there anywhere you want to start in particular with this?
There's a lot of jumping off points, it seems. So I think one of the first notes that I had, it's on the second page of the essay in the second paragraph, and right away, Lanier, he brings up kind of the idea of superstructure and base, and I have a note next to it that kind of, I suppose, wondering if he's intentionally invoking Marx here. And if he is, and I think that he is doing that, what is, I suppose, the base of the industrial society?
Where are you talking about where he's invoking Marx?
So it's page 123 in my copy. It's going to be at the bottom of the second paragraph of the book, and he uses the term superstructure in this. He says, the conviction that our noisy social ferment pretends progressive development towards some highly desired but always undesignated goal is perhaps the central psychological factor in the maintenance of our top-heavy industrial superstructure.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know enough about Marx to pick up on whatever you're picking up on.
I think I did. I also picked up on a lot of the Marx shit, John.
Mm-hmm.
And I had like I had a thought, because like Jack London and Ernest Hemingway are kind of like notoriously Marxist on some level. People might quibble with that. But like Jack London was a hardcore socialist, but he's not like a socialist. a socialist the way you think of it today. And both of them, they're kind of operating in reaction to industrialism, which is really what Lanier's also reacting against in this essay.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about this before, where a lot of these guys, if you didn't know better, you would call them some kind of leftist. Because
well,
there's not just Lanier either, but like the earlier essays, like because of the thing that they're reacting against, which is some kind of like hyper capitalism.
Yes.
But yeah, sorry, continue. I didn't mean
No,
to interrupt you.
No, you're going exactly where I was going, which is like fast forward to 2026, and you're given two options, which is hyper capitalism, Peter Thiel surveillance state, or you're a dirty communist. There's no secret third thing that anybody talks about, which is by design.
Yeah. And I think another important note to kind of open it up with is the religious language that Lanier uses when he's talking about industrialism and the philosophy of progress. He frames all of it as if it's a religion. It has its own gospel. It has its own eschatology. And I think that's kind of at the heart of the criticism he makes, is getting at what that eschatology is. And essentially, I think proving that there really isn't an eschatology, that the progress of the philosophy of progress culminates in. And I think that the religious language can't be overstated or ignored when we're talking about progressivism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the crypto religion of the modern world, right? Like it doesn't call itself a religion, but it's, if you look into it, like the eschatology and what's the word I'm trying to think of? The salvation. What's the word for salvation related stuff in Christianity?
Soteriology.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, it has its own eschatology and soteriology and all that, if you really look into it.
Yeah. And, and he even in that same paragraph, he says, quote, "This belief is strengthened by certain popular interpretations of the spirit of America, which proclaim a mystic faith in the industrial destiny. With a rather complete disregard of specific economic and social trends, authors of this inspirational criticism conjure up a magic venturesomeness of spirit, which they expect to well up momently in sturdy breast and automatically bend economic forces to its will." So I think that perhaps maybe a good kind of jumping off point would be talking about what exactly the end goal of progressivism is. What are we trying to do with being progressive?
Yeah,
like in that opening, or what the religion purports.
Yeah, like what the religion of progressivism would claim is its end goal.
Yeah, I think it's utopia, right? It's sexual equality and earthly utopia.
Well, he's in that first paragraph.
Yet again.
I would say that a big chunk of this essay is like a response to John Dewey. Kind of, right? But he says right there in the first paragraph, John Dewey believes that modern industrial technology provides us with a method for securing progress and for preserving our culture against decline. So like he's saying there that, like, at least according to John Dewey, there's this marriage between industrialism and progress, where industrialism is the means for progress, and for preserving our culture against decline, whatever that means. It's like it's so like nebulous what progress means, and then decline is just like the opposite of that, I guess.
Yeah.
Like what? Yeah. The question is always, what are we progressing towards? And like the progressives never seem to answer that. They're just like, oh, it's progress. The goal is progress. Okay, towards what?
Yeah. Well, and then like as you progress, the goal just becomes like more and more anti-human, right? Eventually, like it looks like transhumanism. It looks like
Yeah.
genetic engineering. So like as we get, now we're 120 years down the road. I don't know when this was published.
About 1930,
1930, yeah.
Okay, so basically 100 years down the road, right? Of this experiment in progress.
Yeah, I sometimes forget that this was written that long ago, because like at one point in here he mentions like the possibility of another world war. And I'm like, oh yeah, this was between the wars, like
the one that's about to start in like 5 years.
Yeah.
It is actually, it's almost staggering how accurate they were in their predictions for what the future of America would look like.
Yes,
they were really incredible. To that point about defining progress, on page 128, when he's talking about Bacon, he says, so talking about progress, he says, quote, its validity would be judged by its effectiveness in producing progress, meaning by the latter, the improvement of man's material and social welfare.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as that seems to be the most accurate definition of progress. Of course, it has all kinds of implications and baggage that go with those terms, but that seems to kind of be the goal, is to improve man's material and social welfare. Which I think goes back to what you were talking about, Frank, with why this essay interested you with, we have achieved the material welfare generally as a whole population. Everybody has a, $1,000 phone in their hand. Everybody has a new car. We have reached that point. And yet we have not seen, we have not seen, I suppose,
nobody's happy.
Yeah, exactly. We haven't seen any metric of social welfare improve also. Suicide rates are higher than they've ever been. It hasn't correlated in our real life experience.
Yes. Yeah.
When he goes on, right after that part you just read, he goes on to say, man henceforth would be concerned not so much with saving his soul as with making himself comfortable, and with improvement of the world through cooperative social effort. So it's about comfort in the end, right? Like, isn't that what progress is about? And all the material welfare stuff, isn't it ultimately about comfort?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One note I wanted to make as we get kind of into this, like a little bit further into this essay, is that as far as I think any of the essays in this book, this is probably the densest and most philosophically charged essay, I think. And so he's going to use a lot of terms, a lot of isms, particularly as they come up. We'll try to make an effort to define them in case anybody's unfamiliar with them. But one thing I want to talk about here is with making himself comfortable. This is all tied up in the pragmatism, but then ultimately the utilitarianism that Lanier talks about, that's inherent and foundational to the philosophy of progress. And depending on which way you want to cut, utilitarianism, it can either be pragmatic or it can also be hedonistic. And I think that I would probably say that history has proven that we've been sliding more towards the hedonistic utilitarianism, and all of the moral value of our actions and of our society are judged by essentially what grants the greatest pleasure and the least amount of pain to the citizens. I don't know if you guys have any more thoughts kind of on the tie into utilitarianism there. But I think it's kind of crucial to understanding progress.
I don't know. I don't know that I disagree, and I don't know that I agree either. It's like it's just like so materialist focused. This like progress. That's where I continue to end up. Like, I hear what you're saying on the hedonism, but at the same time, I feel like I feel like if you look around, you don't see a hedonistic society. Really, I feel like you see a totally apathetic and numbed out society. Not to sound like a fucking Nietzschean vitalist here, but but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There's really like no life to any of it. It is corporate.
Yeah.
In the full etymological like definition of dead, right? Like everybody's dead now, in my opinion. At least hedonism would be signs of life.
Well, I think the two are related. I think that this is just a suggestion. Like, look, I'm retarded, okay? So
we all are. That's
don't take this with any seriousness. But I think, like, or my idea at least is that the end product of the hedonistic society is the numbed out dead one. So we're almost like past the hedonism part, and we're to the numbed out dead part now. Whereas if you wanted to see the like peak hedonism, it would be like 90s, early 2000s. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean the 90s were pretty lit. In 2000s, we go back. I don't know, man.
So an interesting perhaps cause of any disagreement here would be I don't know where you're coming, where you land on religion, Frank, but like for Jason and I as Orthodox Christians,
I'm a dirty Protestant.
Okay, all right.
At least you're not a vitalist.
Yeah,
true.
I have sympathies for the vitalists.
We would, and I'm sure you'd agree this, we would understand that the end result of sin is, of course, death. And
right.
That after so long of participating and engaging in sin, of giving yourself over to it, you start to become less human. And you would start to exemplify less of the traits that make us human, right? The stuff that is actually present in hedonism, the desire to not, roll in filth. That is something that the hedonists would also affirm, right? They don't want to be living in poverty. They want to be wealthy. And the further you move into sin, the more, you're willing to roll in the filth, the more that you're willing to just be content, essentially being nothing and being just an inhuman cog in a greater machine. So on my initial thinking of it, I would say that probably where we are now is a result of having given ourselves over to such materialism and sin for so long, and having forsaken the really just any type of religion, any type of anti-materialism, that we've surpassed the point of caring about worldly pleasures and have now moved into the point of just kind of relishing in the filth that we've made as a people.
Yeah. I mean, there's to use maybe like a poor analogy, it's like we're basically like the glory days of shooting heroin for a couple times are over, and now we're just all crackheads.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not exactly like fun or glamorous at all anymore, but we don't know how to get back.
Right. Yeah. All right. So to continue with the essay.
Actually, before we move on,
go ahead.
I wanted to point out back in the first section, we were talking about the religious language he uses.
Mm-hmm.
One of those words is on page 124. He says, such considerations as these suggest that neither social science nor social philosophy can afford to ignore the problems presented by the hypostatization and misuse of the questionable concept of progress. So, like, Frank, I don't know how much theology you know or anything like that, but when we're talking about the Trinity, the Godhead, we talk about the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as hypostases. Like they're the divine persons, right?
Right. Yeah.
So hypostatization there is like a very religiously charged word to certain people, you know. And I thought that was interesting that he used that word there, talking about the concept of progress itself being hypostatized, like it's being made into a divine person.
Yeah. Well, you know who is like the perfect example of this sort of thinking? Is like the Daily Wire folks. They're like if anybody, you know, suggests that maybe like hyper capitalism and industrialism isn't the best, you know, they react like, you know, you've just drawn Muhammad or something.
Yeah.
Like
the boomer right.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
blasphemy to them.
Right. Yes. The boomer right. That's a good way.
Yeah, and I think that is, I mean, even if perhaps the folks that, you know, first started to promote this progressivism weren't self-consciously creating a religion, I think that the evidence has proven throughout history that that's exactly what it's become. I mean, the Daily Wire is a good example. Like, you can't, if you criticize capitalism, you're basically blaspheming, which, I mean, you know, shekels and Jews and whatever. But, you know,
shekel jokes aside.
Yeah, shekel jokes aside, it is actually a real problem on the right.
Yeah, no, in some ways, like, I feel like this whole essay is more directed at the boomer right than it is leftists.
Yeah.
Or
yeah,
what would the boomers have been in 1930?
Oh man.
Do we even have a name for that?
Civil War vets.
The Civil War vets. I mean, this is like
60 years.
You know, 60 years after the Civil War, you know, like, or 60 or 70 years, whatever it was. Yeah, there's probably some parallels between Civil War vets, especially on the Southern side, like, you know, the conservatives who got defeated in the war.
Yeah.
And like that's probably tied up with the Lost Cause stuff.
This just turns into a fourth turning podcast.
Or Southern triumphalism, you know, like I don't know.
No,
I'm too retarded to make that connection fully.
No, that's kind of interesting because you're trying to draw a Vietnam parallel, I think, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Like you've got,
like I could picture picture like your I don't know, in the 90s or early 2000s, picture your like super conservative boomer uncle who was in Vietnam, and like think of the kind of things he would have said. Like he would have loved Reagan, probably.
Yes.
He would have loved the Bushes.
Yeah.
He'd have been all about the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, supporting our troops and all that, especially after 9/11.
Yeah.
Like I could picture some crusty old Southern Civil War vet like feeling the same way about World War I, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, and part of that too, like with the idea of like the Civil War veterans that would have kind of been the immediate context of this, especially on the Southern side, is they were so devoted to the idea of agrarianism. Obviously, they defended an agrarian civilization to the death. Mm. And part of Lanier's, towards the end of the essay, he even talks about the sort of the inevitability of industrial progress, of technological development. And to me, it seems like he's making the argument that, look, technological development is going to be inevitable, and there's a certain level that we have to accept this, and we have to use it for our own ends. And it would seem like a lot of the real hardcore agrarians, they almost got caught on the back foot with all of this, and they they refuse to be preemptive in any kind of action ideologically.
Mhm.
And so they just kind of got stuck reeling and trying to fight progress from, the exact same context that it was pre-1860s, rather than trying to reorient the way that we use technology. And
Yeah, which is kind of what
conservatives in America, they've always gotten caught on the back foot. They've always failed to actually put forth any positive policies. They've always just, decried what the left does.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I
and
think
they
that's
also-
what Lanier is trying to do here is to to not do that and to say, like, suggest possibilities for saying, like, okay, we don't need to be Luddites and just, shun all modern technology. Like, we need to find a way to use it in a more humanistic way. But
well,
and I think that's kind of the idea of the Southern agrarians more broadly too.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I mean, like, it goes to this idea of, like, you have, like, the right and the left as they exist in America, which they play good cop, bad cop for the same people.
Yeah,
Right, at the end of the day. Whereas, like, in order for, like, an agrarian society to work, you'd also need hard money.
Yes.
Right. You'd need like closed borders, isolationism.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have, like, everybody can't exist on their homestead, in their homestead utopia if you're, like, constantly competing against the global third world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just going to end up in a shootout with hordes of Mexican soldiers, like, manning a machine gun with you and your burros while you all ultimately get cut down, right?
Yeah. And that was actually that was an issue that Thomas Jefferson,
Speaking of which, John,
yeah.
have you seen The Wild Bunch yet?
No, I haven't yet.
Bro.
I need to watch it. I've been lacking on my TV consumption lately.
Well, that's the reason that reminded me of that was because you're talking about, like, not being able to do the thing that we did before.
Yeah.
Which is what that movie's about. Like, it's all these guys trying to figure out how to keep being themselves when they can't. And but there's, like, Frank, you've seen it, so you know the mountain Indians that they come across, like Angel's friends.
Yes. The Scorpions.
Like, whatever we're trying to do is analogous to that, I think, in the context of the movie. You know what I mean?
No, I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, I need to watch it.
Well, because there's when you have, like, this sort of, like, conversation, the next question or the next step is obviously, like, how do you bring this about? And, like, I don't think in, like, a political sense, and I have no idea. Like,
yeah,
it takes the individual families almost homesteading.
Yeah. I'm not to self-promote here, but for anyone interested, I have a couple essays written on a thesis called Patriarchal Anarchism. And the point why I bring that up here, because it's relevant, the point being that in those series of essays, I try to lay out a plan of action that everyone can go ahead and begin undertaking right now. And it is it's not political at all, right? Obviously, our system is completely cooked and we're done. But what we can do is we can reorient ourselves and our families to a pre-industrial, to a traditional way of life, and we can begin to create communities that insulate themselves from the outside world. It is actually possible to, like, break free of the fiat currency.
Yeah.
You don't have to go shopping at Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
You can trade within your community and with other communities hard goods. That's possible. It's difficult, and it takes sacrificing worldly pleasures, but it is 100% possible.
Well, and you can also pay people with silver. Like Owen Benjamin, bless his heart, talks about this a lot, you know, and I actually really do kind of fuck with his ideas there, which is like you can pay people, your gardener, with silver. Like you can pay the farm down the street for your eggs with silver, right? I mean, like spot price on silver just doubled in the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not fiat currency.
Yeah.
It's the gentleman's currency, the way gold is the currency of kings, and it will be forever.
Right.
So, and that's another chink in the fiat monster.
Mm-hmm.
Farmer, right? Like,
yeah. I it's out of the scope of this discussion, probably. I do wonder how much industrialism required the overthrowing of the gold standard.
mm-hmm.
Like, was that crucial to the industrial project?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. I mean, that's how history seemed to play out.
Yeah, I think because like it's the making something from nothing portion of industrialism, where like and like that's what corporations are all about too, is amassing massive amounts of finances to accomplish a project, right? And so then like when that sort of experiment gets big enough, you just start printing money from thin air, and and you spread the inflation across the globe, and you back it up with F-22s if anybody complains, right?
Yeah,
right.
But like the moment that Ponzi scheme collapses, it gets really bad for everybody.
Yeah, you brought up two interesting points there. The first one was when you talked about corporations essentially printing money and creating out of nothing. The first point there, which I think is relevant to Lanier, is later in the essay he talks about the centralization of the federal government, but also the consolidation of the federal government to industry in the United States. Because Walmart can't just go print money. It's not possible for Walmart to print American currency. They need the American government to do it for them.
Yes.
Or the American government, wants Walmart to be under their wing so that they can profit from it. So that's the first point. But then the second point that I think is also relevant is that the whole fiat system strips wealth from the individual, and in like proportion which it strips wealth, it also takes away our sovereignty as individual people in the United States.
Yes.
Which I think is extremely important to us as individuals needing to lean on the industrial system to survive.
Right. Yes. Yeah, like when you're constantly getting just hit on all sides with inflation, and whatnot, and then you need two people, you need a man and a wife to both have a job to be able to like make it, and so then of course your kid has to go to public school or daycare and be raised by some other entity than you, and your family's like totally fractured. Like all of these things, like that's really why I didn't want to do this essay, was all these things play into this, like it all matters, right? Like the whole superstructure, as Lanier calls it, all of this is part of that superstructure to make it work.
Yeah. Man, I was trying to find Frank Shodorov wrote a book called the Income Tax: The Root of All Evil, and he gives some really good statistics to the devaluing of money, of American currency, since the ratification of the 16th Amendment in 1913. And if I can find it, I'll bring it up, because it's actually it's staggering how much money has been devalued.
Yes. Yes.
So I'll point out, Johnny in the chat says Nixon didn't take us off the gold standard until 1971, and that he thinks fiat currency is necessary for financial engineering, but not industrialization. I think, yes, but I think the point here is that it's like partly an end product of the industrial society, and also a necessary step for the thing to take hold fully, like it has now. Like, do you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
So it's not that you can't have any industrialization before that. It's just like,
yeah,
it's a snowball effect kind of thing where it was going to happen eventually, and it also contributes to the solidifying of the industrialism.
Yeah, I think you can have industrialism on a hard currency, on hard money, but it's going to be forced to be honest and competitive, right? So you're not going to have, like, the money is what the money is. So when you fucking go bankrupt, there's no too big to fail. You're gone.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that's like the trick, or the fly in the ointment, when you have, fractional reserve banking and just fiat, is that you open it up to manipulation by, like, the big players, whether that be the state or giant mega corporations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when he's talking about the sorry, go ahead, John.
No, I was just saying I don't see how you can separate the two in light of history. Perhaps, like, you could abstract them, but they go hand in hand.
So I wanted to bring up in section 2, he's talking about the development of the concept of progress. And he says, man was regarded as a personality endowed with freedom. This is like in the prior state, like before this concept took hold. Man was regarded as a personality endowed with freedom and convicted of sin. His earthly sojourn was a period in which he should purge himself of sin through faith in order to return to heaven at the end of it. The doctrine of the temporal finitude of the earth, with corporeal resurrection as a culmination, marks probably the first attempt on the part of man to conceive the flux of events historically or teleologically. But this teleology has no affinity with our modern progress, for it was based upon a belief in the innate depravity of man's nature and upon a denial of all value to earthly life. So the reason I highlighted that, and because I was like, I'm not sure about that, because that sounds like Calvinism to me. And I'm like, I don't know what Lanier was, but if he was a Calvinist, that would make sense that he would think that was like the default philosophy of man. I don't know. John, did you have any thoughts on that?
Hold on, I'm seeing what religion he was. He was... He was... So there is apparently no reliable historical record. Yeah, so it seems like it's unsure whether or not he was any religion. What page were you on?
Well, anyway, like I was like, for that last sentence there, I was like, not sure about that one. This is page 126. End of the first paragraph on that page.
Yeah.
So the teleology would be that man's purpose on earth is to purify himself for heaven, basically, and that has no affinity with modern progress because it assumes innate depravity or something like that.
Yeah, so I actually had quite a few thoughts on this particular part. Really this whole paragraph, but really this whole section talking about like the philosophy of time and whatnot. Okay, so yeah, okay. So Lanier talks about Karl Marx being like the final incarnation of the philosophy of progress, like the most pure one later on in the essay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Marx's anthropology kind of needs to be talked about a bit, where Marx obviously was not a Christian, and he did believe that man was inherently good, like as far as not tainted by original sin. And so I think what Lanier's getting at here with this sentence is that the pre-industrial society understood intuitively that man is sinful, and his sin is not just it's not just a reaction to certain economic conditions, right? Because that's like for Marx, people don't steal because they're inherently sinful. They steal because they're economically oppressed, or they're economically, less well off than the wealthy or whatnot. So that's why people steal.
Yeah.
So I think what Lanier's getting at is just that the idea that man is sinful and that sin can be understood outside of an economic framework makes the more traditional anti-progressivist philosophy completely incompatible with progressivism. And certainly it is tinged with Calvinism, obviously, because we're in America and it was fundamentally tinged, it's fundamentally Calvinist in many ways.
Yeah.
More so in really more so in the North and the Northwest than in the South necessarily. But in either case, the whole ethos is largely Calvinist. But yeah, I would say that a large part of that is just is combating Marx's idea that sin is a result of economic conditioning rather than inherent depravity.
Yeah.
Because even as Orthodox Christians, we would recognize that man is inherently inclined to sin so long, always.
Yeah, in the post-fall
right
anthropology for sure.
Yeah. Now I did have another somewhat irrelevant note, but in that he says, quote, "Man was regarded as a personality endowed with freedom and convicted of sin. His earthly sojourn was a period in which he should purge himself of sin through faith in order to return to heaven at the end of it." That is he's talking about the kind of Greek paradigm here, but it is very Platonic, and in the way that it understands like we were once in heaven and now we have to return to it, rather than a linear progression of events where we were, either created at the creation of the world or inserted into that linear progression of time at some point, and which culminates at the end. And I think that's somewhat important when he talks about the development of Western philosophy of time. Like he gets into the Roman Empire and the way that Christianity scholastic Catholicism dominated the intellectual life of Rome. And then the collapse of Rome, it was the only thing that survived. The Orthodox Church has a somewhat of a disagreement with like Protestantism or scholastic Roman Catholicism in the idea that we do have a more cyclical understanding of time. And we would Orthodoxy is a little bit more capable of combating progressivism, which Lanier kind of insinuates is a natural progression out of this linear understanding of time, than like Western Christianity would be able to. Because Western Christianity especially like Protestantism, no offense, Frank, or Scholastic Catholicism, it has to adopt the idea that time is linear and that people are inserted into time, and it begins at creation, ends at the consummation. So you kind of already have to accept that first principle, which is the foundation for progressivism. And I think that's kind of the point of what he's getting at with this whole conversation, is that there's a logical train of thought from Scholastic Catholicism to the modern progressivism that we have now. Even if it's not, explicit, or it isn't a direct cause to it, there's a kernel in that ideology, in that theology, which leads to where we are now.
Yeah. I think I'd buy that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think it's also, like, you can only have infinite progress on infinite linear time, whereas if you're trapped in a cycle, like the Greeks thought, right? Like, you're inevitably going to decline. Like, that's just a natural part, and then start all over.
So I guess what I was getting at from that is like, he says it's based upon, he says the older anthropology was based upon a belief in the innate depravity of man's nature and upon a denial of all value to earthly life. Like, that's a bold statement, I think. And it sounds like he contradicted himself from earlier in the paragraph, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because he says his earthly sojourn was a period in which he should purge himself of sin through faith. So, like, if that's the purpose of the earthly sojourn, how can you say there's no value to earthly life? You know what I mean? Like, isn't that the value itself? Like, if that's what you're here for?
I don't want to turn this into like a deep theological conversation, but obviously, as with really most Americans, Puritanism has just infiltrated our thought process to really, I mean, we couldn't even figure out how deep it goes. But one of the fundamental ideas of Puritanism, contrary to what they'll say, is some form of Gnosticism, which denies the inherent goodness of the world.
Yeah, I definitely got that from this paragraph too.
Yeah. So I think that's, whether or not he would accept Puritanism or Gnosticism, I think it's just so baked into his thinking that he can't separate Christianity from some kind of denial of the goodness of creation. I just think that's probably just the way.
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, and obviously, the many Gnostic sects found foundation in Plato and Plotinus. And, that's one of the reasons why a lot of theologians try to distance themselves from Platonism or from Neoplatonism, because they find seeds of Gnosticism in Plato with his denial, believing he denies any kind of goodness in creation, that he accepts some kind of dualism, which he doesn't, but that's a different conversation. So yeah, I think that a lot of this is really just tinged with that Puritanism and Gnosticism that was prevalent, especially during this time, but really just pervades American thought as a general rule.
Yeah.
And when he starts to, okay, so then kind of just going chronologically, the next big part that he talks about the church, the Roman Catholic Church, being the last surviving remnant of the Roman Empire. But then he talks about the development of the principle of immanence, quote, which Hegel considered the ruling philosophical thought of the modern world. The notion of a transcendent God, apart from and perhaps indifferent to nature, was replaced by a view which in some sense identified the two. So I think that the point of what he's kind of getting at here is natural philosophy sort of became a type of theology, whereas prior to that, they would have been somewhat distinct things, which I don't necessarily agree with. And I don't think that I don't think immanence finds its birth post-Roman Empire collapse. But do you guys have any thoughts on the importance of the principle of immanence for progressivism?
I don't really know what the principle of immanence is, to be honest.
Yeah, I didn't.
I have not read my Hegel, so I don't really know.
So I'll give my probably retarded interpretation of this. Would be something along the lines that perfecting nature, perfecting an understanding of nature is a theological movement towards perfecting an understanding of God. And of course, the end result is that nature and God become completely conflated, where you have like, oh, well, you know, Mother Nature is actually God, that kind of stuff. But it would somewhat make sense then when you understand that, like, the progressivist, they reject any notion of like traditional religion where man is subordinate and accountable to God. And it's developed to a point where man becomes God. And so in order to then take that place of God, we have to subdue nature. And then we achieve that sort of that higher status. There's no longer a God that is outside of nature that created it, that we're accountable to. God is conflated with nature, and conquering that is essentially a conquering of God and making ourselves God. That would kind of seem to me to be the inferring the end result from that idea.
Yeah. I've just heard back when I was a bit of a retarded James Lindsay fan, I remember him saying immanentize the eschaton. I don't really know what he meant by that, but yeah, I think it has something to do with utopia. I don't really know. This is over my head.
Yeah, I don't know who James Lindsay is, but
you should call yourself blessed, honestly.
But yeah, I would probably assume that's what that means as well. All right, so let's see. Moving on, in that same
actually on the next page, page 131, he talks about the Industrial Revolution as being a counter influence to democracy, which I thought was interesting because I would think it was the other way around.
Yeah. This part of the essay, I think, really gets into the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. I think this is when it really turns into like a polemic against industrialism rather than just like a defining of terms. Is there anything you want to say, Frank, on this kind of, I guess, from like page 130 on to chapter 3?
No, not yet. I underlined a bunch of shit, but you guys keep going. I'm pretty much the same as Jason as far as my Hegel knowledge.
Well, what do you think about that? I'll just read this part that I underlined. He says, curiously enough, the trend toward democracy, which really began with the Renaissance and culminated, in a sense, at the close of the 18th century in the formation of the American and French republics, was now complicated by a counter-influence in the form of the Industrial Revolution. We say counter-influence because the political democracy of these republics was based upon an agrarian economy, upon an individualism which permitted great personal autonomy in the conduct of all phases of living, and which at the same time promoted social stability through attachment in one form or another to land.
Yeah.
So he's saying like the democracy depends on your attachment to the land, and the industrialism undermines that attachment to the land. So it's a counter influence to democracy.
Yeah, which is kind of like a decline of Rome type conversation, right? because you had you know you had, like the centurions and the legionnaires were originally land owning, like citizen. To be a citizen of Rome, you had to own land in Rome, and that was like your ticket to participate in the republic and in the military. And then, as they went and fought and conquered and had these foreign escapades, and some of these soldiers came back rich, then they bought up land and farmed it with slaves. And then, then you get to like the Gracchi brothers, where they wanted to redistribute the land and kind of like do a hard reset, because you had so much of the land of Rome tied up in the hands of the wealthy and then farmed by slaves that you didn't have enough people to participate in the army. And so then the answer to that is, we're just gonna we're gonna hire mercenaries and we're gonna just change the definition of a citizen.
Yeah, and I think to his point also, because obviously they're American, talking in the American context, and just as with ancient Rome and ancient Greece, to be a citizen meant you had to be a landowning in America white male. And Jefferson, writing to James Madison in 1787, writing about the people and democracy, he says, quote, "And say finally whether peace is best preserved by giving energy to the government or information to the people. This last is most certain and the most legitimate engine of government. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people, enable them to see that it is their best interest to preserve peace and order, and they will preserve them. And it requires no very high degree of education to convince them of this. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. After all, it is my principle that the will of the majority should prevail. If they approve the proposed constitution in all its parts, I shall concur in it cheerfully, in hopes they will amend it whenever they shall find it works wrong. This reliance cannot deceive us as long as we remain virtuous. And I think we shall be so as long as agriculture is our principal object, which will be the case while there remains vacant lands in any part of America. When we get piled upon one another in large cities as in Europe, we shall become corrupt as in Europe and go to eating one another as they do."
Banger.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And of course Jefferson gets criticized, and somewhat rightly so, for being like a very left-wing leaning founding father. Very pro-democracy, rule of the majority. But I think the point there being that even Jefferson recognized that in order for democracy to work, there has to be a rooted class of landowners that are the ones that are actually partaking in democracy, because he didn't believe in universal suffrage.
Right.
And so I think that when Lanier talks about the counter influence of industrialism to political democracy, that's kind of what he's getting at. There is the uprooting of man from the land that they have a stake in.
Yeah, I think you're right. And then, progress also has the social aspect, which would umbrella universal suffrage. So, like, I guess in that sense, it is a counter influence to political democracy. Right. Like, if you're defining a political democracy in a republic as being limited to landowning males.
Yeah. It all of a sudden becomes not so shit-lived.
Right.
Yeah.
When you have 120 IQ white males in colonial America having, tavern democracy, it all of a sudden becomes a very base system.
Yes.
This is not like, non-English speaking Mexican immigrant John Doe voting in the presidential election.
Right.
Well, yeah, that would be interesting to look into, is like how the idea of universal suffrage developed in the first place and how it became the default today, because like it doesn't follow that if I get a vote, I will necessarily have better material conditions, right?
Right.
Like it depends on who you are and like what you're going to vote for and whether the things you vote for are good. Right.
Yeah. And I guarantee you, well, I know for a fact the American people had better material conditions, whether they voted or not, when George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or John Adams were president than when, Donald Trump or Joe Biden are president.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you mean by material conditions, I guess.
That's true. That
Well, if I can manage a segue, I feel like Maslow's hierarchy of needs needs to be talked about a little bit, right? Because the counter to progress, or the question of this whole essay, is like, what does human flourishing look like?
Yeah.
What makes a happy human? And like I think Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the base of the pyramid, you've got physiological, so that's like food, water.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have safety, security of body, employment, resources, which, crime-free neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So like, and then above that you have love and belonging. You've got like friendship, family, sexual intimacy. And then above that, self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others. So those two are like heavy family and community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then above that, you've got self-actualization. So like morality, creativity, problem solving, that kind of being the best human that you can be. And so like I think that's kind of an easy touch point, I think, for when you ask the question of like, what does a society that promotes human flourishing look like? It would promote those levels of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Right. And so like in agrarian society, you're going to have your physiological needs met.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have the safety of a crime-free community where everybody knows each other.
Yep.
Everybody's on the same page culturally. You're going to have family. You're going to have extended family that are part of this tight-knit community. You're going to have the community itself. And so like, but then like the progressive urban industrialized society, you've got, you still have to fill all those needs as a human in that society, but it's not structurally, like the structure is not set up there to naturally fulfill those levels. Yeah.
And if I may, I think it's important to, I think, kind of define what we're talking about when we mention like an agricultural economy or an agricultural society.
Mm-hmm.
We're not just saying that, if you have 100 people in an agricultural community, 100 of those people are not running farms.
Right.
You have other jobs that, you have farm hands, you have ranch hands, you have people that are running the farm stands, you have other jobs. And the majority of those people may be doing a job other than growing crops or raising cattle. But the point being that the actual economic backbone of the community is agriculture rather than something like, let's say,
a Ford plant.
Yeah, or banking, right? Where the banks are making money on interest, right? Because in a modern America, that's basically the backbone of our society, is making interest on money.
Right. Yeah. It's now you have like, we've gone so far that now it's fake
right.
work.
It's exactly.
Male jobs.
Yeah. Whereas in that agriculture community, when you resist things like Walmart or Kroger or these big box stores, you're explicitly affirming the agricultural backbone of your community, because food being that sort of foundational element of human survival, when that is dispersed among the community that you actually live in, that is what builds that agricultural backbone. That's what builds the agrarian economy. And in order that likewise roots people in the ground, where farmers are being rooted in their ground to grow crops for their community. The community is then dedicated to supporting their farmers and their means of survival. And so you have this sort of reciprocity of interests that you lack when everyone in a community can go to Walmart, but then, you know, go to their job at Capital One or Walmart or something like that. That's just completely disconnected from their actual needs and their means of survival. And that last bit, I intended to kind of make a segue when he starts to talk about the disconnect between the individual's needs and the individual's means of production. Which I kind of wanted to discuss individualism a bit. I know it's out of order from the actual book, but I think it's important to talk about what Lanier means when he talks about individualism.
Yeah, go for it.
We had there's a question from Graham. He said, quote, how agrarian can a society become before it's at a severe military disadvantage compared to enemies who see the nation as weak? Does anybody want to talk to that?
I don't know. That's probably beyond the scope of this essay, kind of. It's more about agrarianism in general. I think you'd have to talk about definitions of agrarianism and what it is and how it's been manifested in history.
Yeah.
I think you could still have a strong military in an agrarian society.
Yeah, I mean, I think
maybe not in the modern world. Like maybe it's different now because
right.
Warfare itself is so industrialized. But I think maybe in the past you could have something like that.
Yeah, I think the South proved that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too. There's also an aspect of like the military industrial complex, right? Being propped up by the ability to just print fake money.
Yeah.
You know, faster than anybody else can. Right? Like you kind of get to be the mob boss of the world if you control the money.
Yeah.
Because you can just manufacture more money and buy more F-22s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, the actual income of our military industrial complex has to be really just staggering. Because I mean, we have our military budget's almost $1 trillion a year, and then the Pentagon has failed IRS audits for like 8 years straight.
Yeah.
So they're spending even more than $1 trillion a year. And it doesn't cost that much to house and feed the military that we have.
No.
So more than a significant chunk of that money is going towards just buying stuff from the military industrial complex.
Yeah. And and maintaining that edge.
Yeah.
Right. In like tech. So
yeah, it's a never-ending rat race.
Right.
I mean, who was it? Was it just, I think something came out, what was it, Turkey that's trying to develop a 6th-gen fighter jet now?
Yeah, which is, I mean, have they even done a 4th?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, it is. It's like it's the military industrial complex specifically has just become an absolute rat race between nations vying for supremacy.
Yeah.
And I mean, this kind of off topic, but like, how much does it really matter if you have F-22s unless you're engaging in offensive warfare halfway across the globe?
Correct.
Like, it just doesn't matter that much.
Yeah.
I think Iran has probably pretty well proved that you don't have to have 5th-gen fighters and $1 trillion a year military budget to defend yourself.
I mean, Afghanistan too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you spend 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan and can't conquer the nations fighting against guys in sandals.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this comes up when you talk about, counterfactuals for the Civil War. Like, what if the South had won, and would we, because you have to, like, if you play it out, like, what happens if America is not unified when World War I happens?
Yeah.
And we don't intervene in the same way? Like, what changes because of that? Like, I've talked to people, like, I have a friend who's very knowledgeable about the Civil War, but he's also, favors the North. I call him my favorite Yankee. But he talks about that sometimes. Like, I think it's ultimately a good thing the North won, because we were unified when the World Wars happened, and we were able to help defeat Germany. And I'm like, okay, actually play that out though, because, like, what actually happens if America is not unified? Or
I mean,
and you could.
Does Europe even give a fuck about us?
Well, it kind of did at that point.
I mean, but like, okay, like,
If we're not
unified and we don't, don't get involved, like.
Exactly.
Well, but the question is, like, okay, maybe Germany wins World War I instead.
Like, geographically,
like,
America is so impossible to invade.
Yeah.
So
Germany wins World War I or World War II.
Well, yeah, what I'm getting at, like, yeah, it's exactly, that's what I'm getting at. It's like, ultimately, who cares from our perspective? Like, what did we ever have to do with Europe's wars in the first place? Like, what did we even care about World War I?
Yeah.
This is
and then the second one was a direct result of the first one, obviously, and could have gone differently if the first one had gone differently. So, whoever knows. So the point is, like,
yeah,
when I talk to this friend of mine about this, I'm like, okay, who cares? Like, why do we need to be involved in Europe's wars at all?
Exactly.
And why is that even a good thing? But the only question that this would bring up is, what happens when somebody invades us and we're not strong enough? Somebody invades us because they want our stuff, like our natural resources, and we're not strong enough to defend ourselves.
Well,
like,
that's
the real drawback to not having a strong military, right?
But after, like, going through this whole discussion, is like, America is so big and so geographically, like, impossible to invade in a way. Like, if you're Europe or China, like, it's just hell to try and invade America. Like, we're probably the most optimized to just be like a little agrarian isolationist, or a big agrarian isolationist country. And if you do fuck with us, you've got 8 Afghanistans on your hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't know.
I mean, that's basically the argument. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Pat Buchanan's Republic, Not an Empire. That's literally the argument he makes, is like, why did we involve ourselves with all this? Why do we have such a giant standing military? Nobody can fuck with us.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. What Mexico's going to invade us? Like, hey, who cares? We took Mexico City with 5,000 guys.
We're taking all of it next.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it becomes such a non-starter when, I think, especially, and I think it's actually this is off topic, but it's actually a big positive for the agrarian society, especially the way it manifests itself in the United States and the South, was the society was extremely militarized. All of the South's heroes since the American Revolution were military. George Washington, right? Richard Henry Lee. Everybody was in some case a military leader. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson. These are all the people that give birth to kind of these are the American legends that are equivalent to, like, Romulus. It's all military. That's deeply embedded in the American tradition. Every southern state has, multiple military institutes. We are a hyper-militarized civilization, or we were intended to be. It's getting less and less, but that was the whole goal, is like, we don't need a big standing military, because if you invaded the South, like, the everyday citizen, the militia, would just fuck you up.
Right. Well, and that's because the orientation was always defensive for the first 100 years.
Right. Yeah, it was never offensive. You only need a standing military if you're going to be offensive.
If you're going to play world police.
Yep. That's the only reason. And of course, John Adams in 1827 or something, said that the intention of America is not to go abroad in search of monsters to destroy.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the whole ethos of America, is just being hyper isolationist, agrarian, and just letting the world do what the world's going to do. But anyways, that's all. That whole conversation is kind of off topic a bit. But
The good. I think that was a good question though. Like,
yeah.
I didn't think of that.
Now I do kind of want to go back to the topic of individualism, and especially, you know, all of us are on Substack. Substack is a particularly vicious place towards individualism. So what do we mean when we're talking about individualism in like the agrarian or the Southern or pre-modern context? Like, what does that mean to be an individualist?
Are you asking what Lanier thinks or what we think?
Both. You guys can give whatever answer.
I think it means to be I don't know. I don't really know what I don't know what anything means anymore, especially individualism.
I feel like it goes to a question of sovereignty.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas like if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you've got to go work at big box corp every day and toe the line on certain opinions or keeping opinions to yourself or this or that, like you lose so much sovereignty in that sort of situation. You know, like even you have to take a vaccine to keep your job. Right. Like there's so much sovereignty lost in that sort of setup. Whereas if you're like whereas like a medieval peasant, on the other hand, has more sovereignty than the average American citizen going to a corporate job, living paycheck to paycheck on fake money.
Mm-hmm.
That's my interpretation.
Yeah, and I think that's consistent with Lanier. I think if I had to give it like a sentence, I would probably say that the individualism of Lanier and of kind of the pre-modern antebellum South was just the freedom, but also the responsibility to do what you will and to accept the consequences of what you do. And there's a really important quote I think that Lanier gets to when he talks about what freedom means, and he compares it with the freedom of the industrial society. And if someone knows where the quote is, that would be great. But basically, he talks about how in the traditional world, freedom meant the ability to do what was right. And in the industrial world, that meaning has shifted. So he says here, quote, "Liberty is not freedom to act in accordance with an immutable law, for the latter implies a fixed, closed world, a world in which progress and human endeavor have no real meaning." So I think when we talk about like individualism in the ancient world and in the early American context, we're talking about the liberty to do what is right, even if like your government or your fellow citizens disagree with that. You have the freedom you're at liberty to pursue the ultimate good in all cases. Like if your government says that gay marriage is legal, you have the right to say, well, no, it's not. God says that that's not legal.
Yeah,
that I think is kind of the heart of individualism in the antebellum South.
Yeah, which is a very like American orientation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you even going back to the founding, like, and the religious freedom of the Pilgrims, that's always kind of been part of the American myth.
Yeah, and I mean,
Yeah, that's a complicated part of the myth because
It is.
boy, the Pilgrims are like. I'm pretty sure they came over here because they wanted to be in charge mostly.
Yeah. Yeah.
be.
Very, very Puritan
Yeah.
orientation.
There's an interesting kind of debate that goes on in early America about what history of England Americans are supposed to be reading. Jefferson talks about it a bit in his Education for a Lawyer, but apparently, I don't know enough about English like history to know for sure, but apparently there's a big debate about these two families that are vying for the throne. And Hume flipped this history on its head by saying that this family, which supported like totalitarianism, autocracy, dictatorship, whatever term, was the actual sort of foundation for like the Anglo-Saxon race. And the Americans argued against that by saying, well, no, actually this like whatever family, I can't remember what the name was, but whatever family, it actually, the traditional understanding of English rights, of like inalienable rights, comes from a like proto King Alfred tradition of Anglos and whites being able to have freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of thought. And so this actually became a big debate in early America of what history of England we're supposed to read. And a lot of that, the linchpin of that is actually like, how much freedom are we as people supposed to have? Are we supposed to have the freedom to do what's right? Or are we supposed to have the freedom to do what the government says we're supposed to do? And it's a very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Which is way above my pay grade, but it is interesting.
Well, to your to Jason's point too about he's pretty sure they just wanted to run shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like you see that orientation through like the next 100 years of westward expansion too. Like I've been reading The Northwest Passage by Kenneth Roberts right now, and it's all about Robert Rogers, this guy that like tags along with Robert Rogers, but like colonial America like was very stuffy and, dare I say, puritanical. Right? Like it was not you weren't free to be you. You were free to be you 100 miles west, where it was just Indians. But so there's always been like this breaking away in the American story where it's like civilization stifling and stuffy, and then I'm gonna go west and do what I want.
Yeah, that's really interesting because in Grady McWhiney's book, Celtic Roots of the Old South, he talks about the difference in westward expansion between the North and the South, and how the North had this like very strange kind of radical understanding of expansion where like Bostonians went to Kansas type deal, like very just unnatural, like we're just going to geographically distance ourselves as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the Southern understanding of expansion west was like, hey, we're going to go ahead and like start a plantation a couple miles this way, and our plantation will touch yours, and we're just going to keep on expanding that way over generations and generations.
Mm-hmm.
And his point there is kind of getting at is like the North was always seeking a break with itself. It was always looking for like a break with the former ideology, a break with tradition.
Yeah.
And it saw geographical distance as that means to be able to freely break from it without having that external influence of that previous tradition binding it. Mm-hmm. Whereas the South was conservative and looking backwards and moving forwards in accordance with its tradition. And so it was willing to, move forward in little incremental movements, which, yes, geographically distanced itself, but was able to maintain that community homogeneity with its previous existence. A very interesting difference between the two.
Yeah, and I would add to that like, at least, I don't know if this applies elsewhere in the westward expansion, but as far as Kansas goes specifically, like the northeastern immigration to Kansas was highly ideological.
Yeah.
Also, like it was a
Yeah.
It was political and ideological in nature.
Yeah, there was nothing natural about it. There's no reason a
Yeah.
Bostonian or a New Yorker should be moving to Kansas.
Yeah,
That just doesn't make sense. You have Pennsylvania, you have tons of land in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason that you should be just uprooting your life to move to Kansas to start a plantation.
Yeah.
There's no good reason for it.
Unless you have some ideological motive.
Exactly.
Right. Like making Kansas a free state.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder who did a podcast about that.
I can't imagine.
I'll be right back, gents. Y'all continue the conversation.
Dude,
So-
off topic.
Yeah.
Jason, have you ever seen the movie The Kentuckian?
No, I haven't.
You should watch it. It would be a good subject for this podcast, I think.
Yeah.
It's based off a novel by A.B. Guthrie Jr. He's really good. He wrote The Big Sky, which is kind of like considered one of the best Western novels, but it's a really, really, really interesting frontier story movie. Because it's set in the South, and it's set. When is this set? It's set like early 1800s.
Mhm.
You know, and like there's an
Like
Irish
Davy
woman
Crockett
who's an
era.
indentured servant. Like it touches on like the Southern elements of the Southern caste system that like you don't really see anywhere else. It would be a cool movie, I think, to get your take on.
Yeah. I'll give it a watch. Do I need to read the book too?
I don't think it's based on a book. I think
I thought you said it was based on a book.
I think no. A.B. Guthrie Jr. wrote the screenplay, and he was primarily a novelist.
Didn't you talk about a book a minute ago though?
Oh, I guess it was. I guess it was based on a book, The Gabriel Horn. I haven't read the book.
Oh, okay. I thought you said something about a book a little while ago.
Yeah, I did. A.B. Guthrie Jr. wrote The Big Sky,
Okay.
which is a different one. Maybe I'll read The Gabriel Horn.
Yeah, might be worth it.
All right, I'm back.
We were just talking about The Kentuckian, which I have not seen.
The Kentuckian?
Yeah,
it's a
you
movie.
just watch it.
Is it
Be
a
up
movie?
your alley. Yeah. 1955.
I've never heard of that. Is it on Amazon Prime?
Yeah, I think so. I
Okay,
think that's where I watched it.
I'll have to look that up.
So, you guys want to move on to the third section?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's the biggest one, and it's kind of where he really gets into the critiquing the. It's where he really gets into the critique versus the historical breakdown of progress.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. I'm just gonna pick something out and read it. Something I had underlined. Let's see. Oh yeah, he talks about liberty, equality, fraternity. This is probably this whole paragraph is probably worth going into some detail on,
Yes.
because the whole liberty, equality, fraternity thing is the French Revolution
Yes.
motto, right?
Yeah.
So he says the historic formula of democracy, liberty, equality, fraternity, is rationalized by Dewey in terms of his pluralistic metaphysics and his theory of social values. Oh yeah, by the way, he's just shit talking John Dewey this whole time, which is great. So then he says liberty means a universe in which there is real uncertainty and contingency, a world in which all is not in and never will be, a world which is in some respects incomplete and in the making, and which in these respects may be made this way, and which in these respects may be made this way or that, according as men judge, prize, love, and labor. Liberty is not freedom to act in accordance with an immutable law, for the latter implies a fixed, closed world, a world in which progress and human endeavor have no real meaning.
Yeah.
So that's liberty. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? That's the first part of the French Revolution trifecta.
No, I think I'm going to hold off until a little bit later when he breaks down each one, or at least until you make it through fraternity.
Okay.
I would read that whole paragraph. Make it all the way through like the fraternity until
Okay.
it gets to the metaphysical rendering.
Sounds good. So that was liberty. Then it continues. Equality means similarly that the world is not a fixed hierarchical order of grades of human excellence. It means that every existence deserving the name of existence has something unique and irreplaceable about it, that it does not exist to illustrate a principle, to realize a universal, or to embody a kind or class. It embodies, so to speak, a metaphysical mathematics of the incommensurable, in which each speaks for itself and demands consideration on its own behalf. Fraternity means the interaction and association of such equal individuals without limit. To say that what is specific and unique can be exhibited and become forceful or actual only in relationship with other like beings is merely, I take it, to give a metaphysical version to the fact that democracy is concerned not with freaks or geniuses or heroes or divine leaders, but with associated individuals in which each, by intercourse with others, somehow makes the life of each more distinctive.
Yeah. And
so that's liberty, equality, fraternity.
Yeah. And just to add to that, the very first sentence of the next paragraph says, quote, "This is a metaphysical rendering of communism or socialism in some form Mr. Dewey has advocated for years as the only political and social system in which real and moral values could be secured." I don't know how y'all feel, but this is to me kind of the linchpin and the real like driving home point of this whole essay is this conversation on liberty, fraternity, and equality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
I'll let y'all open the conversation on this because this is kind of the point I think we'll spend the most time on.
Yeah, so with the liberty part, he's talking about. Well, we were talking a little while ago about liberty being freedom to act in accordance with the good.
Yeah.
Or God's law, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
And what he's saying that, like, this is all Lanier's take on what Dewey thinks, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But what he's saying here that Dewey thinks is that liberty is the opposite of that. Mm-hmm. It's basically like it's not freedom to act in accordance with the natural law or God's law. It's some much more nebulous thing, like it's an ability to do as you want, basically, right?
Yes. Yeah. And this ties into I don't know if you listened to it, Frank, but the last episode we did with Fisto, when it talks about the exchanging of Goethe's maxim for the new educational system that we have, which seeks to free man's soul from all things. That's kind of, I think, the practical application of this politically is that we have freed man's soul from any kind of attachment, any kind of moral obligation or responsibility. And now they have a liberty to do anything they want, even if it binds their soul to sin, is what I think Lanier is getting at here.
Yeah.
I would like to note, this is not particularly relevant, but Friedrich von Gentz wrote a comparative analysis of the American and the French revolutions. And it's really helpful for understanding like the idea of equality, liberty, and fraternity in the American context versus the French context and how those two are radically different. And I do think it's important, like Jason said, to understand that the way these three terms are being used here is referring to like the French Revolution rather than the traditional American Revolution. In a strange turn of events, the way the French Revolution was, these terms were understood in the French Revolution, was actually utilized in the American context, but not until after our original revolution. This would be like perhaps after 1865. that's when these terms we substituted the traditional American Anglo-Saxon understanding of liberty, fraternity, and equality, and we conflated them with the French understanding of them post 1865.
Yeah. I think that's a good point.
It's convoluted, but I think it makes sense. I think getting into the practical applications of these will help drive the point home. So we went over liberty. Now, equality. I think equality is perhaps the most important point here. It says, quote, equality means similarity, that the world is not a fixed hierarchical order of grades of human excellence. It means that every existence deriving the name of existence has something unique and irreplaceable about it, that it does not exist to illustrate a principle, to realize a universal, or to embody a kind of class. It embodies, so to speak, a metaphysical mathematic of the incomprehensible, in which each speaks for itself and demands consideration on its own behalf. I think the really important part to kind of talk about here is the metaphysical understanding of equality, because Lanier consistently brings up the metaphysical difference between equality and hierarchical organization of society. This is actually a point that Dostoevsky talks about a lot in Crime and Punishment with, I can't remember his main character's name in Crime and Punishment, the ones that gives the...
Raskolnikov.
Yeah, he's the one that gives the courtroom oratory on the great man or whatever, right? I can't remember.
It's been too long since I've read that. I haven't.
Yeah, I can't.
Dostoevsky, really.
I can't remember either.
The last time I read it was in high school, and that didn't really count. So
it's either from Crime and Punishment or the brothers the brothers Karamazov, and I can't remember which one it is, but there's a courtroom oratory in there which basically defends like the right of the great man to do what he wants, abstract from moral, basically he transcends
the right of the spiritual aristocrat to
exactly
date BPD hoes.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. But I do think, obviously I think Dostoevsky kind of meant that whole oratory section to be like, this guy didn't have the right to do this. But I do think there's a sense in which the great man does sort of guide history, which is being directly contradicted here by the ideals of the French Revolution, that there is no such thing as the great man. So what is the relevance of the great man to like Southern tradition, or to really history more broadly, but specifically to Southern tradition?
Well, so like the idea of equality as stated here would be saying that there is no such thing as a great man, right?
Yeah. So on the inverse, what would be the role of the great man to history? Like, what's the role of like Romulus or George Washington or Cincinnatus to history?
Well, I think the great man would be like, to say that a man is great in comparison to others would be that that he's higher on the hierarchy of something, right? Mm-hmm. Like whether it's competence or decisiveness or abilities in whatever field he's in. Like it necessitates hierarchy to be able to say that any man is great in comparison to others. And so like the role of the great man would be to make things happen more so than other men, like to direct other men.
Right.
In what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And so like I think what he's going to be getting at in a little bit in this essay is that that's not really real. Like there's not a great man, and instead what needs to be done is going to come out of some vague like interaction between all the equal people, right?
Yeah.
Like there's some kind of hive mind that's going to come up with what needs to be done, and that's going to drive progress or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to those listening, I promise that this is actually relevant to industrialism. This plays in directly to the role that industrialism has in globalism. Just want to say that. All right, so fraternity, I think, is the point that really drives this home. So now we've established that liberty is the right to basically do essentially whatever, right? It's not bound by any eternal or divine law. Equality is the absolute equality between men. It rejects the great man theory of history, that great men drive history and guide it. And now we get to fraternity. Quote, fraternity means the interaction and association of equal individuals without limit. End quote. So we've already established that according to Dewey, the great man doesn't exist. So all men are equal. No man is greater than another man. And this fraternity is then established globally, right? Every man is brother with other man. And I think this is kind of the point that he's driving home with industrialism, is that industrialism needs to emphasize that every man is equal with another man in order to promote globalism, in order to promote open borders, in order to essentially fuel itself, right? Because it fuels itself with cogs that act as pieces in its machine, that work together, that harmonize to create this broader economic machine that produces something. And I think that's the importance of fraternity here, is destroying all borders, destroying all ethnic and racial differences, and making every man, essentially creating a globo homo here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's Lanier's take on Dewey for sure. I haven't really read any Dewey, to be honest. So I don't know how accurate this is, but I mean, if it's accurate, I mean, fuck Dewey, honestly.
And I don't know about y'all's version, but mine doesn't include footnotes for any of this.
No.
Mine doesn't either. Yeah, I was wondering that while I was reading, like, where do these quotes come from?
Yeah, I do wish they would have included some footnotes here, because this is important stuff that they're just not giving source material for.
Yeah.
But I mean, abstract from Dewey, I think the ideology has still, I think that this ideology has played out, and we've seen this happen. That the metaphysical understanding of hierarchy, the metaphysical communism has been adopted, and that has become the reality that we've lived in. That reality has conformed to this sort of communism.
Yeah, you can just import infinity Somalians to Michigan, and like it's fine because equality and fraternity, bro.
Frank, do you have anything you want to add before we move on to the next paragraph?
No.
Okay. So from the next paragraph, I had underlined, quote, the industrial technology is an important agency through which these desiderata could be realized, for it facilitates commerce and exchange of ideas. It breaks down feudal intellectual barriers, class distinctions, and traditions. Thus, the industrial processes fulfill an educational function, inasmuch as Dewey conceives education to be a process in which the distinctive aptitudes in art, thought, and companionship are related to a maximum degree in each individual, or released into a maximum degree of each individual. So yeah, in that last paragraph, when we talk about like importing infinity Somalians, I think it's kind of the point that he's getting at here, is that like the industrial machine can be fueled by really anything. It doesn't need to be, the white race or Mexicans, or, it can be fueled by Somalians or something, and it's still going to survive. The industrial machine will. It's uncaring as to the homogeneity or survival of the society which it lives in. It can transcend all of those categories.
Yeah, it doesn't care whether America stays America or not.
Right.
Yeah. The machine doesn't care what its fuel is.
Yeah. And
Which
it serves as itself the educational role to create more cogs for its function, basically. It itself educates people to just be dedicated to serving it rather than creating, truly human or productive individuals. It makes individuals that are willing to be parts of the machine, which is somewhat relevant to the last episode that we did on education, the role of it in the modern world.
Well, yeah. The machine would build an education system that builds interchangeable cogs and not members of a culture. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Which is like, not to get, I think this is on topic, but it kind of goes to like the problem with globalism, right, versus nationalism, where you have like a transnational elite that, they're not required to give a fuck.
Yeah.
about the peasants anymore. Whereas if you used to be an aristocrat or a noble, you had to at least keep the peasants happy enough not to behead you and to keep farming. Yeah.
Yeah, we're no longer bound by the arbitrary restrictions of keeping our population alive through homogeneity.
Right. Now if you get too mouthy, we'll just ship in, someone more poor.
Right, exactly. Yeah. All right, Jason, do you have a next underline you want to talk about? Actually, before you go on to the next underline, in the next paragraph after that, Lanier says, quote, "The cause of the present disorder Mr. Dewey locates in the fact that there is a fundamental dualism between the individual's motivation to action and the means by which his action is executed." What is the present disorder? Like, how do we see that disorder manifested in the everyday life of the American, or really the just the person in general, regardless of where they live?
I feel like is Jason muted?
I think Jason is muted right now.
Oh, yeah. I had to go to the bathroom real quick, but I'm back.
You're good.
Oh, did you hear the question?
No. What was the question?
Okay, so from the next paragraph, he says, quote, "The cause of the present disorder Mr. Dewey locates in the fact that there is a fundamental dualism between the individual's motivation to action and the means by which his action is executed." Now, this is getting into the topic of communism and how the industrialism necessitates communism. But I think that it's important to talk about what the present disorder actually is. Like, how does that disorder manifest itself? What are the symptoms of it that we as Americans or global citizens are feeling currently?
So this is a present disorder according to Dewey?
Yeah. But I mean, even abstract for Mr. Dewey, just what is that? Like, obviously we're all feeling a disorder, right?
Yeah.
Like, all of us are struggling. What,
Oh, so this is it's like Dewey's take on what the cause of the disorder is.
Yeah, exactly. But what is that disorder? Like, what is Dewey trying to answer? What is he trying to fix?
I don't know. Man's sinful nature. Probably.
Yeah. I think this is a particularly difficult topic.
Yeah, like, what are you going to do? I mean, that's ultimately what it all comes back to. Like, you can't, I mean, the popular thing, maybe on the right, like on the quote unquote traditional Christian right now is to like point at the Enlightenment or Protestantism, or if you go further back, the Great Schism, or like whatever it is. Ultimately, it all points back to the fall, right?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think it's a really difficult topic, and I think Lanier makes the argument that Dewey locates the cause of the disorder in the quote fundamental dualism between the individual's motivation and the individual's action, which is executed. This talks to the topic of individualism that we were talking about earlier, and in the sort of agrarian individualism, that definition is the means of one's production match the needs that a person has, right? So like you need a certain amount of corn for the year to survive. You can match that from your own land. So this is getting out of kind of the moral realm and more into like what a person is able to economically produce in order to keep themselves alive for the year. And this becomes, when you include all of the, equality, fraternity, and liberty, you start to come to this realization that communism is the only option, because rather than an individual meeting his own needs, the collective must meet the needs of the collective. And this principle is then expanded where the global needs must be met by the actions of the global citizenry.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of this core principle that there are needs that must be met. There is a population or a person that must meet those needs. And in the context of Dewey, that population is then the whole citizenry of a nation, but ultimately the whole citizenry of the globe must meet the needs of the globe.
Yeah, so he's like extending that from a community or a national level to a global level.
Right. Yeah, that's Lanier's argument here for like globalism, is that it can't just stop with, well, our national productive population can produce enough for our nation. The global population must produce enough for the globe. And this is kind of the driving force for globalism, I think, that Lanier is getting at here.
Yeah. Then he says, hence we need, according to Dewey, to inhibit the principles and standards that are merely traditional, opinions and ideals that have no living relationship to the situation in which we live, and attempt to achieve a new individualism.
Yeah.
He really talks a lot about Dewey in this essay.
He hates Dewey.
Yeah.
Yeah, it until we get to, I think, a couple pages later, he starts to critique Marx instead of Dewey. But the logical progression is that Dewey leads to Marx, which is very interesting.
Wait, Dewey leads to Marx?
Yeah, so a little bit later in the essay, he starts to shift his interest to Marx. And he says, so on page... where was this quote? He says, talking about Marxism specifically.
He says, Mr. Dewey believes that public socialism is possible, even though we should have to remake human nature to secure it.
No, that's not it. He
That was I just thought I had that underlined.
Yeah, no, he ties Dewey to Marx explicitly.
Well, that ties in, like we mentioned transhumanism earlier, but like remaking human nature, that's what this progress thing is ultimately about, right?
Yeah, well, in a sense, I mean, globalism, anything that removes the human from his immediate familial community is in some sense kind of the first steps to transhumanism.
Yeah.
Like it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from removing the father from his children to removing the human from the father. It's not that far of a leap, right? Once you essentially degrade all human relations, you've degraded the human to the point that he can be altered.
Yeah.
And I don't know the history of like transhumanist science in 1930. I don't know how much they were really, trying to actually alter the human as a person, is, a thing. But especially in the modern world where we have people trying to live forever and whatnot, it becomes pretty obvious that this philosophy has ended with transhumanism, with the idea that the human being as a person, as a thing, can be just completely altered and made to live forever, or made to, have implants put in it to control his mind.
Yeah, the final version of everybody being made into a cog in the machine is becoming literal cogs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's
like Brian Johnson?
Yeah.
What's Musk's that implant that he has, the
Neuralink?
Yeah, Neuralink. Like that's kind of the end result of everything talked about here, is like the human's just going to become a robot, essentially. At the very least, just be controlled by a robot.
Well, yeah, and that's like, that's the impulse behind like social credit system, mass surveillance, right? Is you're just like a little fucking worker bee in the hive. Like,
yeah.
And if you step out of line, then you get tased or something.
Exactly. Now, I do think that an important part talking about kind of transhumanism, he says on page 145, quote, "The only association or communication of any psychological import is that of face-to-face interaction among individuals, as it appears that instead of more association of this sort in the corporate age, there is actually less of it." And he goes on to talk about a whole slew of things that we can talk about: the destruction of the family unit, the destruction of the role or the responsibility of parents to educate their children, the outsourcing of essentially of human relationships. But one of the promises, or the apparent promises, of industrialism is like, rather than working on a farm in a tractor, out in the saddle for 12 hours a day, you get to go work in an office with other human beings. And what Lanier is essentially saying, it seems, is that, well, actually, yeah, you get to be around other human beings, and yet human communication, human interaction is actually less than it ever was.
Right. All you can talk about is Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed that before. Like when I, go to like things where there's a lot of people, whether it's like the beach or a concert or something like that, where there's a big crowd, and you're like, the sense I always got from going to stuff like that is that I'm here and I'm kind of, sometimes I'm by myself, sometimes I'm with a group, it's either way, it's like there's a sense of not really participating in whatever's going on.
Yeah.
It's like, in a way you kind of are, but in another way, you're just seeing a bunch of people you're not connected to at all. Kind of doing sort of the same thing. And there's something kind of fake about it.
Yeah. And I mean, all, having been in the military and everything, I don't know about other branches, but in the Navy, it's like everybody is given, if you're a corpsman, you're an HM, right? HM3, HM2, HM1, depending on your rank. You're recognized and addressed by the role that you fill in serving the greater organization. You're not addressed as a person. You're not addressed as your name. You're addressed as a rank and as a part in the machine. And it would seem to be that's kind of the way that it just is everywhere, right? You're an HR person. You are a custodian, all the way to, really being anything, right? If you're a federal worker, you're whatever organization you work for in the federal government, and you're not a person. You just are what you do.
Yeah.
You are the part that you serve in the greater machine. And I think that's kind of what Lanier is getting at here with the lack of human, the decrease in actual human interaction is the community, as the family breaks down, you start to degrade the interaction that you actually have with other humans. It doesn't matter if you see other humans on a day-to-day basis if you're not engaging with them in any meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he says on page 146, the real association exists for the generality of people only in the agrarian community and in the villages and towns which are its adjuncts. It depends upon a stable population, upon long acquaintances, since human beings do not bear spigots by which fraternity can be drawn off for the asking. The city necessarily means a diminution of these associations. The casual, fleeting, formal contacts with great numbers of people only enhance a sense of isolation and consequently inhibit the very process of liberation of spirit which Mr. Dewey rightly regards as of great importance in mental development.
Yeah. The progressivism is, especially in the American context, is always kind of dialectically opposed to conservatism. And, we all know that that's obviously fake, right? Like, American conservatives and progressives serve the same uniparty. But in an ideal sense, the conservatives represent a continuation from the past to the present, and then they're looking towards the past to guide what they do in the future, right? Whereas progressives, they don't have any recognition of the past. That's kind of the ideal there. The conservatives look to the early American founders. They look to the Constitution. The progressivists, they just don't care about the Constitution. And on the kind of the microcosmic scale, that's what he's talking about here with the family and the generations, right? Like, families, they remain in the same community, they remain in the same cities and towns as their previous generations, and they kind of continue on that lineage that made the early American families great, right? Like, we still talk about the Lees, the Washingtons, the Jeffersons, because they're not only great families, but they also were rooted families in the same places, in the same hometowns. They were influential forces in where they lived, and they had a continuity with one another. And that's something that's distinctly lacking today in the era of freedom of movement driven by, planes and trains and automobiles, where families just uproot and move halfway across the country, and they have no kind of continuity with what came before them in the place where they actually live.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult issue because the foundation of agrarianism is that there's a rooted population that is like a landed gentry, right? You have a landed population that is tied to the land in some meaningful way. It's their sustenance, it's their identity. Families revered and honored, in Jefferson's case, Monticello. That was something the Jefferson family respected. They wanted to be rooted in Monticello. Now we don't have families that are rooted in land. We just have families that are dispersed, that are maybe loosely related by, some accident of history, rather than an intentional desire to maintain continuity with what came before them.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And-
remember. I remember being in my mid-20s and like, figuring out what I wanted to do with my life and thinking about where I wanted to live. And it's like, I'm thinking about like, at some point, I was thinking about what city I wanted to live in. It's like, well, do I want to go here? Do I want to go there? What do I want to do? And in retrospect, it's such an absurd choice.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
why am I in a position that I'm even thinking about this in the first place?
Yeah.
Like, as if I can just slot myself into any particular place and just live there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just had a conversation with some friends of mine. We were talking about the, I guess kind of like we were blackpilling on, or they were blackpilling on like the economic situation of our children. Like, okay, well, the fact that you're blackpilling on the economic situation of your children is a fact that you're playing right into the hand of the industrial society, of the dehumanizing tendency, because in a traditional agrarian society, you don't worry about the fact that your kids have to make $100,000 a year to buy a house because, they're living with you or they're building a small house on your property.
Yeah.
And then when you die, your family's moving into that house that you left. Right? Like, and then you're supporting the building of other homes on your property. And your family's extending on this particular piece of land. They're not moving halfway across the country and have to make $150,000 a year to buy a house that can house their, husband and wife and 3 children. That's something that's unique to the present situation. Nobody just sent children off halfway across the country. You just stayed where your family was. That was just normal. And now it's abnormal.
Yeah.
And it's when we talk about like, it makes a big difference when, sure, you may have, if, you buy 20 acres of land for what, $500,000. Okay. Your mortgage on the land and the house is say $3,000 a month. You thug it out for a couple years, your kids get older, and then all of a sudden your kids decide to stay on the property with you. And now, your kids work a part-time job and are helping to produce food from the soil of the land that you own. Now your mortgage all of a sudden dropped to, $1,500 or $2,000. And another kid does that and your mortgage has dropped even more. And then in a generation, your mortgage is paid off and your property is producing the fruits and the food that your family needs to survive. And now an entire generation is surviving off of the fruits of the land that you bought. That's a completely different situation from urbanites buying a house in a cookie cutter neighborhood with their children buying a house in another cookie cutter neighborhood a state away. It's a completely different paradigm that we're working from.
Yeah. So we should probably we should probably talk about the practical application of this. I think probably wrap it up soon too.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a couple hours, but towards the end of this essay, he gets into practical application, and I think kind of the catch-22 of agrarianism in general, which I think all of these guys are aware of, is that it's hard to make prescriptions for anything because it's not a top-down thing. It's not like you can just engineer an agrarian society.
Right.
That's kind of antithetical to what agrarianism is in the first place. So it's like it's more like suggesting an ideal and pointing people towards it and saying figure it out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But he does get into some Lanier in this essay does get into some suggestions towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
He says it is a project which demands far-sighted social engineering, which is an interesting thing to hear from a guy who's like conservative or traditional in any way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this ties back into his criticism of the great man theory, because the fact that he's criticizing it should give us understanding that he himself is either passively or actively supporting the idea of the great man theory, right? He's criticizing it. He's saying that the communists reject this theory. We, on the other hand, accept it. So in order, if he's going to accept the great man theory, then he has to accept all the things that are downstream from that, such as social engineering, right? The great men do, in a sense, engineer the society that they're ruling or they're living in.
Yeah.
And I think that the idea of social engineering in agrarian society is not necessarily antithetical to the American ideal, where you had presidents for a long time that did ensure, obviously America was founded on the agrarian ideal, but for a long time that was, in a sense, artificially maintained by presidents, right? They ensured that these things were written into the policy of the American legislature or were otherwise unofficially supported by organizations or through their own writings. And they kept this sort of agrarian ideal on life support for a long time, even up until after Lincoln's War. They still kept this agrarian ideal on life support, and still today the South is more agrarian than the North is, because great men have gone out and they've written and they've influenced policy to ensure that it stayed that way. So I do think that there's a certain understanding that, like, we do need a great man that will encourage or enforce agrarianism to sort of reorient civilization from where we are today. What that looks like, I don't know.
Or civilization will just do it naturally whenever, when the big collapse happens, right? Like when the pyramid scheme crashes down.
Yes.
and everything will just be forced into whatever, figure it out, figure it out mode, basically.
Yeah, we talked about that last week a bit with Fisto, but like nothing is infinite but God, and this whole thing is going to collapse. It's going to come falling down, and it's going to be bad for a lot of people. It's going to be really bad. A lot of people are probably, unfortunately, going to die.
Well, we're all going to die.
Yeah, but like a lot of people are going to die before their old age, because they can no longer buy food from Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be an unfortunate. It's going to be unfortunate, but I think that one of the things the Southern Agrarians are getting at is kind of reorienting society to be able to absorb the collapse and to be able to provide for local communities and families, instead of relying on the system, which is inevitably doomed to failure in the end. Now, an interesting point that I think to some might seem somewhat antithetical to the Southern Agrarian project is that he says, quote, "Industrialism bears its own antidote, but it is a bitter one." And then he says further that, quote, "Further mechanization of industrial production should be encouraged, since this would mean that progressively fewer persons would be required for its processes." And I think that's, on its face, it sounds somewhat contradictory to the rest of the essay, that he's criticizing the industrialism for, he criticizes specifically for causing a lot of unemployment, and then having to supply that unemployment through like unemployment benefits and stuff like that, right? And all of that then all of that's tied into like income taxes and stuff like that. It subjugates the population to providing for the lowest common denominator, etc. But here what he's talking about is like we should actually encourage the technological development of industry to actually fulfill its ends, which is creating less need of manual labor to supply the same product in order that those that are unemployed can devote themselves to then agriculture. Like he says, that we can take the people that are currently enslaved to the industrial system, we can free them from that using the technological development of the industrial society.
This is where I kind of wonder, like, I think this is the essay is showing its datedness.
Yeah.
With this point specifically, because it's like maybe that would have been possible in 1930 to take a bunch of unemployed people and say, here, go, you can go work on farms now, or you can be agricultural. But like, I think, we were talking about the spiritual corruption earlier of hedonism. And it's like, I think today it's probably quite a bit different. Like, I don't think you're going to find the average unemployed person in America and get them to productively employ themselves in agriculture.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that is where I live. We have buses that regularly come through that bring illegal immigrants to the watermelon farms because nobody else wants to do it. Presumably, I mean, perhaps they're a lot cheaper. I don't know, but
it's nobody wants to do it.
Yeah, nobody else is doing it. So
having grown up on a truck farm.
Yeah, and
it's like a real catch-22.
Yeah, there does seem to be a bigger discrepancy now than there probably was in the 1930s. Like, now it's a whole lot easier to do, computer-based jobs when you can use AI than it was, in the 50s or really the 70s and 80s, 90s, before AI existed, when it was still, in some sense, manual labor or intellectually laborious to do any kind of automated jobs.
Yeah. Well, there's there's probably like a devil's advocate sort of argument to make that like the fake work email job from home where you just kind of like also do your own hobbies on the side is sort of like it's sort of aristocratic, like it like that's kind of like peak now.
Yeah,
like you especially if you can do that in a place where like all your family is around. I don't know, there's like that kind of setup is almost hard to complain about. The only real gripe there is that like if the work is truly fake, then
I wonder about my own work sometimes. Like I have it's not just an email job. It's, in coding. Like I got into that like when before everybody started saying learn to code. So I've been in it for a while, but like, it's heavily impacted by AI, obviously. And I do wonder about like what the ultimate purpose of my work is, like what it's supporting and what the end product is.
Yeah.
And like how fake is it really,
Yeah.
But I will say, like, as a guy who has one of those jobs that's heavily impacted by AI, and also I'm not gonna like I do work. Like it's not like I sit around and do nothing all day, but it is work from home, which is really awesome. And it does kind of let me do my own hobbies on the side, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I will say it's like
your family all day.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And it is really nice because then I can go buy land and have some cattle.
Yeah.
And sort of do that and like work towards being a hopefully someday I'll make enough money to retire and I'll already have something started that I can do in my retirement instead of just sitting around and or like instead of buying a freaking mobile home and traveling the nation like a boomer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is something we talked about last week with the promise of industrialism with education. It's like, yeah, Yale and Harvard no longer requires you to come in knowing Greek and Latin, but also the promise of industrialism is that you're only going to work 5 days a week or 4 days a week eventually, and then you're going to have all that time on the side to do that. And part of that is like, most people aren't going to be willing to use their free time to better their education or to better their economic situation. Most people are going to be using their free time to then buy from the industrial machine, right? To go to malls, to go to the movies, to do all of these things, which are then going to require more labor to fulfill the demand from the machine.
Yeah. Yeah, you like it is possible to supplement, that hierarchy of needs correctly, but like it takes a little bit of insight and a little bit of discipline.
Yeah.
It's unintuitive per the broader culture.
Right. Yeah, something which most people most of civilization lacks that. That inherent drive to better their own life or to better their education or to participate in.
Right. It's
what
normies samsara.
Yeah. It used to be considered like gentlemanly to, study law or history or philosophy in your free time. Now it's like nobody cares about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was, unless you guys have anything else, I think that was about the last note that I had.
Yeah, I think I'm good on the essay.
Yeah, same.
Go read it.
Yeah.
If you're listening.
Yeah, and go buy a farm.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah. Right now.
So, Frank, is there anything else? You got anything else on the essay or on yourself or anything?
No, I think I'm good. Nothing to plug really, as far as books coming out.
Well, except your books you already have out.
That's true. Medicine Woman, Once Upon a Time in Argentina. You can follow me at pulpwest.com.
Yep. And you can buy those books straight from Frank instead of going through Amazon.
You can. Yeah. We're in the internet age now, folks.
That's
you
right.
Don't need to give away like 40 or 50% of your money.
Yeah, don't supply the machine. Buy straight from Frank.
Right. Yeah. Yes. We're practicing what we preach here.
Yeah. Yeah. So, buy Frank's books. Follow John on Substack. He does. I think you've been doing a lot of essays lately. You write more essays than I do.
Yeah, I tend to keep my. I tend to write. Sometimes I write an essay a day, but I tend to keep my essays up pretty high. Yeah.
So yeah, buy Frank's books. Follow John on Substack. Follow me on Substack. Listen to my other podcast where I talk about the history of Yankee colonization of Kansas. And let's see what else. Oh yeah, what I've been writing lately is a series of articles summarizing the Book of Mormon, which I'm reading for an upcoming series on Mormonism. So stay tuned for that, especially that one Mormon guy that we're both friends with, whose name Connor something.
Yeah.
Who I was just talking to today on Notes.
Yeah.
He might be interested in that, or maybe he'll hate me when it's over, but who knows? He's Mormon, so he's nice, right?
Yeah, he's actually a nice guy.
He won't hate me.
No.
Even if I talk a little shit sometimes, maybe.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. He's cool.
Yeah. So anyway,
and your series on the 10,000 was excellent.
Yeah, I just finished up a trilogy on Xenophon's 10,000, which I thought was really cool. It's one of the greatest, for my money, maybe the greatest war story ever told.
Yeah, it was.
It seriously rivals Homer, in my opinion. as far as like the story itself.
Yeah,
And I can't figure out why it's not more well known.
yeah, that is interesting. Why it's not as well known as Homer?
Yeah,
Because
I think it used to be. It used to be as well known as Homer.
Probably. Yeah, they liked literature back then.
Like Alexander the Great sure was fond of it.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that in the third part. How much influence it had on the Greek world early on.
Yeah.
The discrepancy to now.
Yep.
Most people have never read Xenophon. Don't even know who he is.
Yeah. So yeah, listen to all that. Go subscribe to all the things. You can support us for $5 a month or $50 a year. Also, oh yeah, I almost forgot this. We got a debate coming up, maybe.
Yeah.
With John, because John just can't stop antagonizing people on Substack notes. Just always talking shit and like always getting people mad at him, and like, you know, every once in a while you get somebody who actually wants to talk. So maybe this guy does. I don't. What was the guy's name? It was Nurgle Jones.
Yeah, yeah. He wants to talk about whether or not the war and the Ku Klux Klan was about slavery primarily. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. So we got a debate tentatively scheduled for next Sunday, a week from today.
Yeah.
So you guys definitely need to nail down a prompt, because it's going to be scattered otherwise. But I will be moderating. So, and even though I'm friends with John, I will be fair. I promise.
Yeah. Yeah. It should be good. We'll see. We're in the talks with that.
Yeah, cool.
And I would like, if anybody listening wants to debate anything that we've talked about or anything that we are interested in.
Yeah, we talked about setting up either doing it on this show or maybe on another show.
Yeah. That's
like dedicated to debate, and calling it Cognitive Combat Corner.
Yep.
Spelled with K's.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to get involved with that or has any topics that you're interested in debating or publicly defending, we are more than happy to host it.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. And lastly, sorry, I keep thinking of more things. Next week on Saturday, the next proper episode of Charlie Horse Radio, we're going to be talking to Father Nikolai Myers, an Orthodox priest, about the next essay in the series, which is Remarks on the Southern Religion by Alan Tate. So I'm really looking forward to that one, because I haven't read the essay yet, but I know Father Nikolai. And he's really great, and I'm really looking forward to having him on.
Yeah, and I put a message in in my chat for my publication. But if anybody has any questions that they want to ask Father Nikolai, you can send them to me or Jason, and we'll make sure to ask them at some point. Probably at the end of the episode, we'll do a big Q&A with Father Nikolai with any questions that anybody has. So if anybody has any questions, just send them to us, and we'll make sure they get asked.
Yep, sounds good. Well, Frank, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Any last things you want to add?
Nothing for me. No. Appreciate it.
Cool. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks all.
Later, y'all.